Hey folks, this is Alex Moffett-Bateau with the Politics of Freedom podcast. As you all probably know by now, I'm not super into the really complicated introductions. Most of these folks are super prolific and people have their own ideas about who they are. So I really try to honor them by letting them describe who they are to the world. But what I will say is I'll start out by talking about what today's guest means to me and what she means to me and what her work means to me, right? So the person we're talking to today is Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs. And I also want to honor the kind of space that I think Alexis and I are both in as we're starting this process, because we're just kind of both finding out that our beloved ancestor bell hooks has passed. And so I'm certainly very in my feelings. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a instant crier. So I am feeling full of grief, but also an intense appreciation for all of the Black women, and particularly the Black feminist women who walk before me, beside me, and who are coming behind me, right? And so with that in mind, Alexis is someone who I think I met first in 2010 or 2011. And I can't really remember where exactly, because we had some overlap in graduate school and we were at all of the Black women graduate student things. And then, we're that age where we were in graduate school when Twitter came out. So there's this period where you're talking to all these people online that it feels like they're your besties because there's 10 Black people on Twitter, period. Right. So I can't exactly pinpoint the exact time and place that I first started talking to Alexis. But what I do remember is being diagnosed with lupus in 2010. And, I think first beginning work with Alexis in around 2011 or 2012, she was working as doing her independent scholar thing, but also doing dissertation coaching, and her workshops and classes and all of these things. And I, just being diagnosed with lupus, and then in 2012 getting initiated into leukemia, I had no idea how much both of those things were going to blow my life up. And I really didn't have the tools. I didn't have the tools to finish what I was facing in graduate school. I didn't have the tools to write the Black feminist work I wanted to write. And I didn't have the tools to identify myself as a Black queer feminist woman who had a right to name herself as all of these things, right? And so, Alexis and I worked on and off for about 2 or 3 years there. And, she was the one who said, nobody gets to tell you that you're not queer, right? Nobody gets to tell you that you don't have value because you can't do all of these things, right? And she was always so honest in naming herself as a workaholic and saying hey, this is not something that I want for you, right? So let's figure this out in real time, right? And Amani Perry was really good about that too, being look, as a person with lupus who works too damn much, I don't want this for you either, right? And so there's this kind of circle of Black feminist love and care and accountability that I was really ushered into in my mid-20s by, all these Black academic, Black feminist women. And Alexis was a really important part of that. And it's really has been central to my analysis around capitalism and productivity and disability and living as a publicly disabled person and a queer person and a polyvert person. Like, I very much credit you with opening those doors. Just like I credit Bell Hooks with being one of the very first, like, contemporary Black feminist writers I ever read, right? And it was very much given to me with this call of action from one of my Black women elders in my community. Like, she wrote this when she was 19. Get your shit together. When I was like 20 or something, right? So, you know, I know Alexis as this really just kind but politically incisive scholar, thinker, Black feminist, woman, person, sister friend that I deeply appreciate. And so, yeah. How would you like to introduce yourself, Alexis?
I'm Alexis. I'm really happy to be with you right now. I think that this is the best possible thing. Black feminists talking with each other in this moment. Mm-hmm. And I live on land of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation, the land that is nurtured by the Eno River, and if you look on the maps right now to find it, it'll be called Durham, North Carolina, at least maybe for a little while. And I am a queer Black feminist troublemaker, aspirational cousin to everyone, and a marine mammal apprentice, and a reader and a writer. And I'm a sister, daughter, auntie. And I'm in the midst, I'm really revising a new biography of Audre Lorde right now. So that's a major part of my days. And yeah, I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. Man, I have to say, like, you are so creative in your naming of yourself, right? Like, every time we talk, you have another, like, like, I think the OG one was, like, Black feminist troublemaker, and then it was, like, Black feminist love evangelist, and like, aspirational cousin. Like, I'm like, yo, like, your gift is so tied up in language and how you name yourself, right? But also how you name others. You're definitely one of those people who taught me, like, naming things really matters. Like, giving language to things breathes life into them in a particular way, right? Whether we're talking about, like, letting people know that they're not alone in their feelings, or naming ourselves so we're clear on our call, right? And what we're supposed to be doing. So, yeah. One of the things that I would love to hear you talk about to begin is, like, how did you start that process of naming yourself, and what does it look like as you continue to process that process of self-naming?
Yeah, I was thinking when you said you talked about how bell hooks came into your life through one of your elders when you were in college, and I mean, bell hooks came into my life also when I was in college, and at that time, it was the love. It was all about love, communion. It was that was what she was publishing at that time, which obviously resonates for me as a Black feminist love evangelist. But my introduction to Black feminism was through Audre Lorde, and specifically through Audre Lorde's poetry. And I mean, I know that. But thinking about it in this moment, what you say is really true. It's a poetic process of naming ourselves. And so when I'm naming myself, I think about, you will notice the one thing that's always there is Black feminist, right? And that will always be there because, as we've talked about before, the miracle that there were people generations before us who called themselves Black feminists, who were willing to face all kinds of filth, harm, violence in order to express a vision that could make us all free. I must always say that I come from that. Always, right? And at the same time, I'm in this poetic process of naming, because part of what it means, and of course I emphasize this with you, for us to name ourselves is that people think they know and they don't know who we are. and people think we know who we are and we don't know who we are. Like, we're in process, right? Like, I'm in process. So when I'm describing who I am, it's like, what do I want? You know, I really do want to be your cousin. Like, I'm very aware of this desire. And then, but it evolves, because like what it is to be your cousin could mean so many different things based on whoever you are. And it's a way of making an opening for relationship. You know, Audre Lorde would say she didn't want someone to think they were the only one. So she would say Black, lesbian, feminist, poet, warrior, socialist, mother. You know, she would say that. And that is obviously the source text for me whenever I'm naming myself. But I mean, as somebody who has looked at the ways that Audre Lorde has described herself in different moments, they're also super creative. You know, sometimes that litany included nearsighted, high maintenance, you know, all these things, which apply to me as well. So yeah, it is a poem. You know, it's a poetic act to name myself, to propose a possible relation, which I am doing when I name myself with you. And it's also, I'm also reading and listening for the poem, you know, of who you are, like your sacred repetitions, your form and structures and line breaks and silences and rests, you know, all of that is poetic. So, I mean, I think it's not a coincidence that I come to Black feminism through the poetry of Audre Lorde, which is not linear in the way that her brilliant polemical essays are, which of course are also a huge influence on me. It's very different. It's the poetry of someone who is like often navigating a breakup or whatever, you know, like her poetry, writing about a dream that she had and the nightmares and the violence and the earth and an erotic energy, but in a way where so much is possible. And it's so much about the faith to not know who we are and acknowledge that we're in transformation, which for me is the exciting part.
It's so funny, as I was listening to you talk, there are so many things that popped up into my mind, right? I started thinking about, you know, I love a good word choice, right? And so I started thinking about one of the sacred repetitions I've heard from you over the last decade or so is about litanies of various kinds, right? And I never really thought about that word because it's pretty churchy, and I was never raised in any proximity to church culture in that way. But recently I've been encountering a lot of Black women who use some really churchy words that are just so apropos. You know, like, man, we don't give these church mothers enough credit. We don't. Like, you talk about like brilliant social theorists in their own right. You know, these are people who created language for spiritual practices that just straight up didn't exist in slavery, right? And have continued those bonds and traditions forward, right? And so I think about litany in that way, right? But then I also think about when I was listening to you talk about the self-naming and the calling of those names and how you name others, I started thinking about how I really enter this as an ethnographer and how that informs how I think about Black feminism, right? And so for you, you enter through Audre Lorde's poetry. For me, I enter at 15 in my cousin Mimi's New York apartment in the city. And I just knew I was too grown because I got to spend the day there by myself. And of course, the first thing that 15-year-old Alex does is go through all of Mimi's books, like through them all. And I find Words of Fire by Beverly Guy Sheffield, right?
Oh, yes.
And I had never seen the words Black feminist together before, and it blew my mind. But like, that was, you know, and this is how you know, like, spirit, like, really truly knows what it was doing, because that book traces the chronological and the genealogy of Black feminism from 1900 onward, right?
Yes.
So my entrance into Black feminism was learning that this is a historical legacy that already existed way before I was a thought in my mother's eye, right?
Yes.
So when I'm thinking about the naming and the calling of Black feminism and the process of going back and saying, yeah, you know what, this person was pretty Black feminist, right? And, or this person didn't use that language for this reason, right? Like, that genealogy is for me, my entry point, right? And I think that's
I love that so much.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's why, part of why I'm doing this project as I'm thinking about it, because it's very much, I mean, it's about kikiing with people I like, right? Absolutely. But it's also an archival process that I'm deeply committed to as an ethnographer and as a political theorist, right? Like, Black feminists need to have their ideas recorded over and over and over into perpetuity until people get it, right? And a big part of that work is going back and naming that this history has already happened, right?
Yeah.
But it's also affirming that, like, mofos is still out here. They're still publishing. They're still doing work that matters, right? So then that brings me to this last piece that I'm thinking about in terms of self-naming. And the thing that this connects to one of your other like self-naming practices around like ancestor accountability, right? Mm-hmm. And what strikes me about that is like key to every African traditional religious practice. And to be clear, I include the Black radical Christian tradition in that, right? Mm-hmm. Is calling the names of our ancestors, right? Yes. And is naming those people, their like birth names, their play names to the community, who they were in the church, who they were in the community, what they did, right? Like, we don't just call people's names, we say who they were to us, right? Which again, even in this podcast is something I'm trying to, it's funny, like thinking about the things I do subconsciously that I'm not like tying together, right? Because that's very much part of my practice here, right? Of like saying, this is who you are to me. Now tell me about yourself, right? And that is so central to Black feminist thought, right? This cornerstone of this idea that like, if we come, we're bringing community with you, right? Like, we're not doing the mainstream feminist thing and we're going to just go live on a commune over here with just Black women. Like, no. Like, y'all coming with us, come hell or high water, you coming, right? Very much in the tradition of Harriet, wow, I was getting ready to say the wrong thing. But very much in the tradition of Harriet Tubman, it's like, you better come on or you just gonna be dead, but you're not gonna be unfree. Right? So this
you will
naming
be transformed.
You will be transformed. Either in this lifetime or the next, but it's happening.
Yes.
You know? And so this process you do of like naming yourself, which is very much telling people this is something you can be. This is something you can do. I exist because you exist, right? Yes. It's also this process of like saying the litany of those who have informed us and who know us and who have created space for us to enter, right?
Yes.
And it's just so funny for me every day as I think about how tied Black feminism and Black spiritual practice are tied to each other as social and political organizing forces, right? And how they so deeply inform how we treat each other and how we talk to one another, right? So, sorry, you know, I think and talk at the same time. But what I'm really thinking about that I want to ask you about is how do you think about Bell Hooks and who she was when we think about the genealogy of our Black feminist foremothers, right? Both who she was in the past and who she was to us today as she's passed on and transitioned. Does that question make sense? I know it's a little convoluted.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the things, I don't know. I don't know if I'm really answering your question. I guess the answer is gratitude, always. So I guess I'm just saying what I'm grateful for. So I'm grateful for Bell Hooks, and for so many reasons, but there's something that Bell Hooks did in her writing and in her work as a public intellectual, her speaking, her particular collaborations that offered Black feminism to Black women in a way that more Black women could hold than only the Black women who were in the academy, or only the Black women who were, you know, deeply entrenched in building activist organizations. There was a way that so many Black women saw themselves in what she described and the way that she actually offered her own life and her experiences as a way through to these ideas and possibilities that, of course, you know, she was in conversation with all the other Black feminists that we can name. And that's important. You know, like I think about the fact that when Communion and All About Love were coming out and I was in college, there were, you know, these administrators at our university that, you know, that it's not, okay. So Beverly Guy Sheftall came to our school and spoke. It might have been during a Mellon conference or something. And she walked in. I'll never forget this day. And I love Dr. Bev forever. She walked in the room and she said, "I'm a radical Black feminist. That means I'm always challenging capitalism, patriarchy, homophobia, and heterosexism." And that's like, my image is that she was like, still walking in the door when she said that. Like the first thing, it was like, this is what you need to know, right? Speaking about these litanies, like, this is who I am. This is what it means, right? And there were people who worked at our university. I went to Barnard College at Columbia University, and there were women who worked at Columbia University who would never say that. And I don't think believe that, you know, like, and I didn't see living that actually, that which Beverly Guy Sheftall said. They were not always challenging those systems. They had a different strategy where they felt like they had to be part of certain systems, and you know, they thought a lot about inclusion, but they were interested in the idea of love that Bell Hooks was talking about. And they were creating reading groups and dessert circles, and you know, they identified with it, and somehow they weren't afraid to. And that's interesting to me, because I still don't know if I fully understand that. You know, I think I scare a lot of people just saying who I am, you know, all the different parts. They're like, wait, what? You know, And that's okay too. And sometimes people just ask me, they're like, love evangelist, like there's different
Like, what do you mean exactly?
Like, what do you mean by that? Which I want, like that's what I want to happen. So we can have that conversation. But I just know that there are people who Bell Hooks created a technology and lived her Black feminism in such a way that it was portable, profoundly portable. And people would give it to each other, and people would use it, and people would give it to their daughters who yeah. And I don't know, obviously this is not to say that it wasn't radical or what it didn't challenge people, or, that as we spoke about earlier, that she didn't get death threats for just being a Black feminist and saying she was a Black feminist for years of her life. I'm happy to know that, as an elder, she began to say that every single day she got letters and messages from people thanking her for what her work made possible in their lives. Yeah, I think that there is I think that there's a miracle that happened through Bell Hooks that I'm never going to stop benefiting from it. I live as a Black feminist, and what that means and what that feels like and how people respond to that and how they have access to being with that is not imaginable.
Right.
Without the impact that Bell Hooks has had on our entire culture. And I'm thinking about her impact on Black people. I don't really know, people who aren't Black, if they read, but I don't even know about that. But I know that, of course I know other feminists of color are influenced by Bell Hooks for sure. But when I think about what it is to be a Black feminist in Black community, yeah, I just feel so much gratitude. That's what I'd say about it's ancestral accountability. It's elder accountability, before, but it's also the reverence that, as you say, connects all of these different spiritual traditions, and Black feminism is my spiritual practice. Absolutely. It is my central spiritual practice that's also informed by other African derived spiritual practices. The reverence is the knowledge and the humility to be able to say, yeah, we're all wonderful miracles existing, existing as stardust and whatever. But my life, in the way that I experience it, is completely contingent on the miracles that other people have made out of their lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's not actually anything there without it. It's not like there's some Alexis's life and you just subtract these things. There would be nothing there.
Right.
So that means with every breath, with every action, with every decision, we are an accounting of what these ancestors and elders made possible.
Absolutely.
On our best days and our worst days. I'm just trying to be a accounting that, they wouldn't be too ashamed of and embarrassed.
Right.
But, but even on my worst days, what it is that's happening here that's called Alexis Pauline Gumbs is a story, an account of these conditions of possibility impacted by these multitudes, those who we name and whose names we know, and those whose names I don't know yet and may never know.
I love thinking about that, right? this idea of our existence as an accounting of the work that has already been done. Mm-hmm. I think that's why I used to get so frustrated. Remember 5 years ago when people were wearing those T-shirts like, I'm not my granddaddy, I'll fight you, or whatever, like I'm not Rosa Parks.
Yeah, we don't have the same granddaddy.
Right? Exactly, right? I'm like, I don't know about your granddaddy, but mine had to leave the South because he was about to get lynched by some white people for talking shit. So I don't know,
but we don't have the same granddaddy.
But it comes to mind because I think what was so frustrating about that, even though I didn't have the language at the time, was there's this assumption that like everything we do in the present is like brand new and has never been done before, right? As though like our capacity to do these things aren't a direct descendant of the dreams our ancestors had for us, right? Like Trisha Hersey talks about this so beautifully when she talks about rest, right? Like if all I ever do is lay down, my ancestors are up here like catching the Holy Ghost because they didn't get to lay down, right? Like
exactly
and this idea of like Black feminist future is, and Joy James recently had been talking about Black feminisms as in a multiplicity of feminisms, right?
Yes.
And I think we have to adopt that same language for liberations, right? There are a multiplicity of sites of Black liberations, right? And that we can't like deduce it to this one thing, right? So when I'm listening to you talk about that, it again brings me back to Lukumi, because I think about, one of the things that people know about like Lukumi or Orisha traditions is like people say Ashe, right? Like as an agreement or understanding or affirmation, right? Sometimes people understand that the word Ashe is also a word used to describe internal political power, right? Like your literal, not your political power, but your spiritual capacity and power, right? Yeah. And so as a direct result of who you are, where you're born, how you're raised, but also the spiritual work that you put into yourself, your mental health, so on, that also grows your spiritual ashe, right? And so when you go through initiations, right, nothing in Lukumi can be done alone because no singular person has the ashe to initiate anyone else, right? You have to have the collective consent to birth someone, to bring someone into our spiritual community. The community has to agree to that, right? There's no doing any of that by yourself, right? And so the initiation and ceremony is so beautiful because there's this point where all of the elders come and they put their hand on their head and they pray over onto and into you. Yes. And it's like the universe stopped for me, right? When I'm in this room of elders, half of whom I have never met, and they are praying into me about who I will be and whose I am and who I belong to, right? Yes. They're saying the names of our spiritual ancestors and our familial elders over me as they speak into me, and to breathe. They take some of their spiritual power and they give it to me as a gift upon which I can then build my own, right? Yeah. And so then it's my responsibility as a spiritual, like somebody told me yesterday, I'm a spiritual elder because I'm 10. I was like, oh shit, I'm not ready. Right? But like, it's my responsibility. Elder is relative. Because I still feel like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. But what that person was saying is like, okay, but like, regardless of how you feel about it, you now have a responsibility to share your ashe, right? Yep. And so ashe then is a literal material that is passed on to us hand by hand and puts in our pots and all these kind of things. It goes on your head, it goes, right? But it's also a metaphysical concept and it's also a language. And so, and this is where I love what you were saying about Black feminism as your spiritual praxis, because it's very much the same way, right? In a lot of ways, you can't just call yourself a Black feminist. Someone has to call you into Black feminism, right? your Black feminism has to be affirmed by the community of Black feminists, right? Because if you out here talking about I'm a Black feminist, and nobody ever like says like, yeah, I'm in community with this person, eventually people are going to be like, huh, like, how do you have a community-centered political practice, but you're not in community with any of these people, right? So I love that, right? Like thinking about how these intellectual and political and artistic ancestors, they've toiled the ground and cleared the space for the idea of our existence to take root. And I mean, you know, they don't know what that's going to look like, but they had faith in it, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Bell Hooks taught me to fight for my survival. She taught me it's okay to protect yourself. She taught me it's okay if people think you're scary, right? Like, it's okay. Some people are just going to see you as a dark-skinned woman moving through the world, and you're going to be scary. And there's nothing you can do about that. But I'm going to still do my thing. And it's so funny. I hadn't thought about Bell Hooks's, like, non-academic work in a while. But she was always getting shit for what she was writing, right? Whether it was like anti-woman and her political manifestos from margin to center. But then she got a whole bunch of shit for working with Cornel West and, you know, the love work and the depression work. You're not an academic anymore. You've gone soft, da 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 da. You're trying to appease all these people. But she's one of the elders that I can think of that immediately comes to mind that was like, hey, I'm a whole ass person. And y'all don't get to make me this Black feminist political cartoon that you trot out when it's convenient. Like, I get depressed, I do things, and I have things to say about that. So you can read it or not, but bite me. Right? And I just, so much about her choices brings me joy whenever I think about them. Because she just exerted so much agency and just was willing to take righteous critique, but still did what she wanted, you know? And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I want to run and hide anytime somebody yells at me, even if it's a student, you know? So I just can't imagine how she persevered under so much criticism over so many years, but she knew what she had to do and she did it. And I think that's my big reminder for this day is like, you have to, you know, self-define and self-name, but then it's on you to live those things, regardless of how other people feel about it.
That's right.
So when you think about, like, if somebody asked you, what does Black feminism have to say about Black liberation, either about what it looks like or how we get there or something else, right? What comes to mind?
Well, I mean, my theory of Black liberation is Black feminism, so it's everything. I think that it means that Black liberation is all of us. Mm-hmm. It's not anything less than all of us. Mm-hmm. And of course, that comes out of what the authors of the Combahee River Collective Statement say. Mm-hmm. That for Black women to be free, everyone would necessarily have to be free because our freedom requires the destruction of all systems of oppression. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All systems of oppression. All of them. I think that that's what Black feminism has been saying and exemplifying about Black liberation forever. You know, as you say, you know, as Beverly Guy Sheftall documented in Words of Fire, before the term Black feminism existed. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Anna Julia Cooper was saying, where and when I enter, right?
Right. Everybody comes
exactly.
with me.
Yes. Pauline Murray was talking about Jane Crow. I mean, Claudia Jones was talking about capitalism and how it impacts us in particular, right? That is
Honey, Fannie Lou Hamer was talking about the intersectionality.
Saying nobody's free until everybody's free,
including poor Black people that y'all don't want to claim, right? So, like, yeah, you're so right.
Centering there, centering there, right? Because, yes. So I think that what Black feminism has to say about Black liberation is that it's possible, it's interconnected, it's all of us. It's not even just all of us, it's all. Period. Like, whatever white man wants to stay inside of the idea of white supremacy, he can't stay there either.
Nope, you don't get to live here no more.
Everyone has to be free. Everyone. Everybody. And what are we afraid of? You know, that Bell Hooks wrote about this. When are we afraid of our freedom? And what part of our freedom are we afraid of? Because we all are afraid of a certain aspect of our freedom. And practicing Black feminism as a spiritual practice, which means it is my faith, it is what I believe in, means that even though we may be afraid of what's on the other side of our freedom when it comes to whatever it may be in this particular moment, maybe that my current relationship to capitalism, what is on the other side of me being free from that? We, through our inherent connection to all, we move through that. And we move through it with love and creativity. And we talk to each other about it, right? I mean, that is like the primary Black feminist practice, you know? Right?
We're not calling the cops. We're calling each other.
Yes. Yes. And it's, you know, we've been in the archives. Like, it's a lot. These conversations are a lot. There is trauma. There is disagreement. And there's so much growth and possibility in it. And so I would say that, you know, one of the things that Black feminism has to say about Black liberation is that it's not about being right.
Right.
It's not even actually about rights. It's about the transformative power of love. That's what it is. And yeah, that's what I see. I think Black liberation is all this love energy that is us, that moves through us, being fully free to exist, to move as it is, to proliferate. And everything that blocks that, by which, once again, we mean all systems of oppression.
Right.
It's in the way.
You
can't block this love. That is the faith. That's what I believe in. I believe in love more than I believe in any lifespan, any piece of convenience that's offered to me by the systems that currently exist. And I think that it's important because it's like, that's where we need to look. And I understand that we're all wounded in multiple ways by the way that these systems of oppression attack us, attack me as a queer Black woman. And my transformative work is absolutely being informed by that and healing that for multiple generations behind and before. But it's also to heal and unlearn and unravel my own attachment to these systems that exist. Why I can imagine them existing, and it's work to imagine something else. Why do I trust my complaint about capitalism more than I know how to ask for help from a friend who I can call on the phone? Right? I'm much more articulate in my critique of capitalism than I am in my phone call that's like, I don't even want to admit that I need something. I don't know how to say what it is I need. And I'm really struggling to formulate a request that would expose my vulnerability to my own people, like my own person I would call on the phone.
Right.
So that's what Black feminism is teaching me about the practice of Black liberation, which is a practice that I'm in, that we're in. And, as my mentor Cheryl Green would say, it's more than a notion. It's more than a notion.
Especially when our definitions of love are bigger than like what Hallmark capitalism tell us it is, right? So love isn't just like rah rah, I'm nice to everybody, although that's a big, I believe in kindness, right? Even if I don't necessarily believe in a politics of niceness.
Right.
But like also loving accountability, right? And lovingly saying, as you say, right? Like I can critique capitalism. Ooh, I dropped my headphones, my bad. Like I can critique capitalism easier than I can call a good girlfriend and tell her she hurt my feelings. Or that she lacked integrity in this particular moment or violated an agreement that we had or whatever, right? We rather just disappear and ghost people and never talk to them again for 20 years, right? Or it's easier to cancel people, right? Rather than get really serious about the process of building local systems of accountability in our communities that hold us. That say, even if you make a mistake, we're going to walk you through this process of holding accountability so you can re-enter community, right? Like you don't just get to, again, like my freedom is tied to yours. So you can't just go off on like harm doer island, never to return, right? Like we have to think, because we all will cause hurt or harm at some point, right?
I was going to say, this whole planet is harm doer island.
Right.
We here.
So how have you set up your life to help people process that reality and to deal with that and hold that and give them the tools so they don't have to do it again, right? Because most harms and hurts are coming out of systemic oppressions anyway, right? But, this piece about giving up our darlings in service of liberation, I've been thinking about this a lot in regards to the middle class, right? The Black middle class in particular. We have, and I say we as someone who was born and raised middle class, right? Like we have operated as a fundamental barrier to liberation for at least 200 years, right? In the sense that we're like, okay, racism is fucked up. Capitalism isn't great, but I'm safe in this particular moment in time with this job and this health insurance. So like, we can't fuck none of that up. So we can go rur on the street as long as I can get my check from University X, right? But if we're serious about abolition, meaning, and I very much see abolition as an outgrowth of Black queer feminism.
Oh, it is.
Then all of this shit is coming down. It has to, including the places that employ us and make us feel secure. And so, to your point, right, then Black feminism is really saying, okay, but we can trust each other enough to build relationships that help us get over that hump, right? Like, we can keep each other safe, right? You don't have to, the institution is not neutral, right? It's not just going to objectively keep you safe. So why not build
quite
relationships?
The opposite.
Exactly, right? Why not build relationships that can admit to their flaws with people who can admit to their flaws, and then go from there, right? But that's a set of tools. That's a set of interventions that have to be made. That's a set of ideas that have to be put in the world, right? Which is, you know, oh, it's so funny. I hadn't thought about this, but it's taking me back to Bell Hooks's work that's so accessible to different groups, right? Like, that's the radicalness of it, is that it like brings people in, like, okay, we're just going to talk about love and romantic love, and it's going to be safe. And by the end, secretly, you're thinking about your platonic friendships as a site of radical growth, right? Or you're thinking about therapy as a way of getting through your kind of Black feminist struggles, right? So, you know, before we end this conversation rather, it occurs to me that, like, another way you are very much in the genealogy of not just Audre Lorde, but Bell Hooks, is in the writing you've been doing about ecology over the last couple of years. That I just love, like, this interview you just did on Finding Refuge about being like the cousins of whales and things like that, right? I very much see that in the legacy of Bell Hooks's work about love, right? Because that's a book that anyone who cares about animals or whales or nature could be drawn to. That's work that we all understand. Often people are more activated to save animals than they are Black people for any number of reasons.
Well.
And your work bridges that gap, right? Because that's always like one of the biggest contentions that a number of Black activists have had with animal activists, is you care more about these animals than you care about Black people. And you find a way to walk us through that common kind of issue and talk about what animals are teaching us about Black feminist work. And it's accessible and it's joyful in a really similar way. So that's how I'm thinking about your work right now as I'm moving through these early hours of my grief about Bell Hooks. But I'm curious about if you think about your work around ecology and Black feminism in similar ways, and how would you describe your work, that particular intervention, and the way it speaks to people outside of our kind of Black feminist ecosystem, so to speak?
You know, I hadn't thought about it that way. I mean, I hadn't thought about it. I mean, I certainly hadn't compared it to Bell Hooks's work on love explicitly. But I appreciate you saying that, you know, and I do think that, I mean, what I see in Bell Hooks's work is that everything is about Black feminism, ultimately, right? So food, right? How do we think about food in terms of eating the other, and the Black feminist analysis that we can bring to consumption and, you know, everything, right? And that's one of the things that I think is an important part of Bell Hooks's legacy, because, you know, Bell Hooks is going to write about the movie that just came out, right? And why is she writing about it? Well, she hates it, but also because, you know, the critique that she has is the same critique that she has of the entire system. It's just, she knows we saw the movie.
She
right?
knows we went to go see Beyonce.
She's meeting us where we are. She knows we listen to Beyonce, you know. So she's coming where we at with her critique, you know, and you know, it is similar to what you said about the Black middle class, you know, because I do think some people are like, can't we have anything, you know? But yeah, we can have everything, you know. I think that I see bell hooks, you know, could enjoy all these things also, all the food, all the cultural things and the art and whatever. But the critique is still there, and it still is coming out of the system.
There.
Like that is facts. So yeah, I appreciate that because of course, whatever I'm thinking about it as a Black feminist. And when it comes to the marine mammal apprenticeship, I think that as you say, I don't see a gap because what is harming us, the ability to imagine an anti-Black world, is the same way of understanding what life is that is destroying the ocean and harming the marine mammals. It's the same one. It's the same one. So it's not like, well, if we could just be as nice to Black people as we are to whales, like it is not, that is not happening. Like it is the same fear. It is the same lack of accountability. It is the same imaginary separation. That it's the same one. So I think that's, I didn't know that, you know. I was listening to whale sounds because I just wanted to like fall asleep or, you know, like I just wanted to meditate. And then I realized there was something important for me to learn. I realized I was really at a limit in my grief, in particular my grief around my father passing away, that I was at the limit of my breathing. I was like, how do I even handle all this salt? Like, I never cried so much in my life. And who knows about breathing in salt?
Well,
marine mammals know. So to this day, I don't understand really how they do it, but I'm like paying attention. I was like, this is who I need to learn from. This is who I need to be more like. And it was not until after I followed that impulse and I started reading, you know, about marine mammals every day that I started to see it, like see it exactly. What is the work of language that you do that can separate us from the ocean, without which we could not survive? And I was like, oh, I see it. Okay, I see it. Okay, I see it. And a lot of the writing that I did that's not even part of Undrowned was just like me seeing it, you know, and like writing about, okay, this seems like it's about, you know, this beaked whale, but this is what killed my dad. This is the same thing.
Well,
and then I was able to say, okay, so if this is happening, because remember, I come to my Black feminism through poetry. Right. The work of articulating what life means that's happening and that understanding is profoundly violent. It's resulting in this literally toxic situation that we're breathing. Then what, as a person who works with language, what can I say? What can I say that makes a space for that love energy that is Black liberation to come through right here? Right here where they got, you know, where they're kidnapping the orcas and trapping them at SeaWorld. Right here. What is it that I can say that is the loving thing, that the related thing, that I refuse to be separate from you thing? What is it? And I'm just going to try my best to use this language that way. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it is. You know, it's many iterations of that occurred as a daily practice that I was in. And I do think that, I don't know if I have the kind of vigilance, you know, that Bell Hooks has. I see like, you know, I depend on certain Black feminists, like, you know, like Brittany Cooper, or Treva Lindsay, you know, like who I love so much, because I'm like, they're gonna say it, you know, like, this thing happened on the news, they're gonna bring a Black feminist analysis to it. Yeah, thank God.
Thank you, God, because I can't.
Thank you, because I can barely even watch the news, you know.
Exactly.
And I'm sitting here like, you know, I'm sitting here listening to SEALs and trying to figure out what they say. So, you know, we all have our roles, but certainly part of what Bell Hooks has taught all of us is that our Black feminist critique, we bring it everywhere. It is always relevant. It is always relevant. Mm-hmm. And nothing is safe. Nothing is safe from our Black feminist critique either.
You're going to get these Black feminist hands. With love and accountability, you getting this Black feminism today.
Everything must change. That's what's happening. So,
shout out to
I'm great. You know what I'm saying? Because I love that, you know, and I think maybe that's something that I'll miss. And maybe that's part of what I'm grieving, is that, not that it's missing, because I do think that there are Black feminists in the lineage of Bell Hooks who are on top of it and will not allow a cultural moment to happen without bringing the necessary Black feminist critique. But you know, like as soon as you know that Bell Hooks wrote about it, like,
you're like, Bell Hooks I gotta pay attention to this.
Whatever movie it was, you know, no one is safe. You know, like,
no one is safe.
That this is about to be a transformative moment. People are not going to all agree with each other, but we already don't all agree with each other. And you know, it's just this space of activating it, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful. I think that it's such a blessing to have elders who not only do they have a Black feminist critique, but they are in their full audacity.
Well,
and they are like, I don't care. I'm gonna say it. And so I am grateful for Bell Hooks for that, and I'm grateful for all of us coming up behind her who are brave enough to bring our Black feminist critique wherever we are, and our Black feminist love, you know, and we're using that critique to make space for that love to come through. And I absolutely feel loved by Bell Hooks in this moment. And yeah, I appreciate her for keeping me vigilant about my love for us too.
I love that, right? Like, thinking about Bell Hooks as the canary in our coal mines, right? Of like, okay, like, y'all gotten too far off the rails now. Pay attention, right? And similarly, Alice Walker, you know, writes her blog post once a year, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta pay attention to this, right?
And you never know what you're gonna learn.
And it's always the first time I encounter it, I'm always like, this is so random, right? But then, like, I had the same reaction in honesty to your work. I was like, this is so random. Why is she writing about whales, right?
But she is not a marine biologist.
Last time I checked, this is an English literature PhD. But yo, then the pandemic happened. And the only thing my nerves could take is watching nature documentaries for 12 months. And I was like, I get it. I'm there. Yeah. We're here. I get it. Right? Because like what you're saying here in so many words is like, just like being nice to whales isn't enough, neither is being nice to Black people, right? Because the same systems that systematically and structurally lead to Black disenfranchisement are the same systems and structures that lead to the poisoning of the ocean. So you can be nice to individuals all day long, but if the ocean is literally filled with trash, or Black people literally can't survive the pandemic, everybody's paying for that, right? And so I love the way, you know, and this is so apropos because we're ending the way we started, which is thinking about the naming of things and the connecting through the similar genealogies of naming that allows us to see these things that have their power and their ability to be unseen. And
yes,
that's truly the gift that you've given to my life, right? You talk about like Black feminists, you always have to keep your eye on like, okay, I've been spaced out in depression land for too long. I got to come back to life. Alexis telling me something. I got to get my shit together. Like what we mad about, sis? Right? With you, it's never we're mad. It's more like we're holding loving accountability in this moment or something, right? Or like, okay, got to get it together. Right. Yeah. And so I really appreciate the work that you've done and our now beloved ancestor Bell Hooks, ibae, and you all's reminders that nothing is safe because we want to truly create a universe that's safe for everyone, and we're not there yet.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want folks to know about work you have coming out, or places they can find you online, or projects you want them to pay attention to or support?
Oh yeah, find me. So Alexis Pauline is all the things. AlexisPauline.com, Alexis Pauline on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, come be my cousin. I'm down to talk about Black feminism anytime. And yeah, I'm just grateful for you and that you're creating this beautiful space and that you are living your brilliance on your own terms. You know, this is like my greatest joy. And I want folks to continue to open themselves to this conversation. And I think you're such a great model of how to be conversational in it. You know, like really be present with each other, really be listening to ourselves and each other at the same time. And you're amazing at it. And you're also making it accessible in a way that we can all jump in and practice it. So I'm super honored to be on your podcast, and I'm even more honored to be in your life.
Thank you. That means the universe to me. So I appreciate that deeply. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Politics of Freedom. Hope to see you next time. Bye.